Chapter 131 Monk Tianxin Breakthrough. The old Taoist priest agreed, because he really owed Long Yu a huge favor, and he would feel uneasy if he didn't repay it. Alas, the hardest things to repay in this world, besides feelings, are favors. This old Taoist is truly afraid, the old Taoist muttered dejectedly, hiding in the clouds, surrounded by the gentle breeze and the bright moon. He didn't want to go down there and stay with this bunch of mediocre people. At the Heaven and Earth Bank, the Moon Angel returned to report. Master, all 10 Dao saints have been killed, said the Moon Angel Ursula calmly. How is it? How is the moon wheel? Xiandao asked curiously. Excellent. This should be the most suitable weapon for me. With it, I can kill those 2 people at the Hengsha realm. Moon Angel said confidently. Holding a celestial artifact, if one doesn't have this confidence, then the Moon Angel Ursula is not worthy of wielding the moon wheel. I believe you can kill them. In fact, I could kill them both right now. But there are more than just those 2 at the Hengsha realm among them. There is also a Taoist hiding in the clouds. He is the strongest among them, Xiandao said in a deep voice. Long Yu and Mo Tiendi were not taken seriously by Xiandao at all. On the contrary, it was the old Taoist who had never shown his face that made Xiandao a little wary. The old Taoist's inner strength was immense, like a divine tree. Its appearance was unremarkable, but it contained an incomparably vast power within. This power was far greater than that of Long Yu and Mo Tiendi combined. There are people like that? Moon Angel exclaimed in surprise. She went there just now and didn't find anything. Xiandao nodded and said, It's normal that you didn't notice. Even I discovered it by accident. His concealment is perfect. It must be a killing move they prepared. If I'm not careful, I'll be fine, but you will fall into the trap. The Moon Angel said solemnly, What a treacherous Taoist priest. So let them come on their own. We'll wait for them on the black soil. When they arrive, I'll have a surprise for them. This farce should end now, Xiandao said coldly. Yes, master. The Moon Angel nodded, turned and left, her demeanor aloof. Xiandao closed his eyes, just as he was about to begin his cultivation, when he heard a loud thud coming from the neighboring mountain peak. Xiandao opened his eyes and watched as the clouds and mist swirled, the aura surged, the 5-colored light shone, the sun and moon revolved, and finally transformed into a golden Buddha statue. Monk Tianxin has broken through. Xiandao's face lit up with joy. He had gained another expert at the Hengsha realm under his command. Saints are divided into lesser saints and greater saints. Greater saints are further divided into 5 levels. Only by breaking through to the final level, Dao Saint, can one transcend the saint realm and reach the realm of countless sands. Hengsha has 18 levels, each level representing a different world. The immeasurable flow of sand is like the Milky Way in the 9 heavens and 10 earths, with an endless quantity. The realm of the immeasurable sand represents a level that encompasses heaven and earth. The fact that Monk Tianxin was able to have an epiphany after being injured and break through in one fell swoop truly pleased Xiandao. He had thought Lucifer would be faster, but now it seemed that Monk Tianxin, with his profound knowledge and experience, had taken the first step. However, it was perhaps an epiphany on the brink of life and death that led Monk Tianxin to take this first step. Lucifer is still a little short of breaking through, but Xiandao is not worried about him. His light and darkness body has unlimited potential, so breaking through will not be difficult. Let's go see him. With a thought, Xiandao's body quickly disappeared and reappeared in the Universal Library. In the Universal Library, Xiandao saw the monk Tianxin, whose body was crystal clear, like a porcelain doll. After his breakthrough, he retracted the Buddha's golden body, then sat on the ground and began to practice his cultivation technique. In fact, he started practicing demonic arts right in front of Xiandao. Master, protect me, I want to be one with Buddha and demon. Monk Tianxin said calmly with his eyes closed. Xiandao nodded, no problem. Xiandao was taken aback when he agreed. You're the master, and I'm the master? How could I have listened to you and protected you? Despite his frustration, Xiandao obediently became the protector of monk Tianxin. They were his subordinates after all, so he had to protect them. Once you break through and become one with Buddha and demon, I'll have you handle things for me. Don't expect to have a good time until you've dealt with 10,000 cases, Xiandao thought viciously to himself. He felt he had to become a heartless boss who exploited his employees. Buzz buzz buzz. Just moments ago, monk Tianxin was as holy as a Buddha, but in the blink of an eye, he collapsed and fell into demonic possession. His lips even changed color, turning purple. Xiandao reached out and channeled his true energy into the monk Tianxin, stabilizing his soul and allowing him to merge without interference or worry. Buddha statue and millstone in one. Monk Tianxin is forcibly merging Buddhism and demonism into one, allowing himself to evolve rapidly and move towards a higher realm. Xiandao watched silently, protecting monk Tianxin's soul and preventing it from being harmed when the Buddhist and demonic energies clashed. Knock knock knock. The demonic arts practiced by monk Tianxin were very strange and unorthodox. They were not a single book, but rather integrated with his Buddhist cultivation methods, forming a new method of cultivation. This cultivation method was created by the monk Tianxin and is called the Buddha Demon Origin Method. Xiandao watched with great interest. He didn't know how to cultivate, but that didn't stop him from carefully understanding and absorbing the strengths. Every form of spiritual practice has its own strengths. Observe more, think more, ask more, and understand more. This is Xiandao's insight. Rumble. When a golden Buddha appeared before monk Tianxin, discussing the Tao with a demon lord shrouded in demonic energy, monk Tianxin opened his eyes and said with satisfaction, "Thank you for protecting me, master." Buddha is in front, demon lord is behind, and monk Tianxin is in the middle, a trinity, or perhaps one trinity. Monk Tianxin's cultivation broke through to the second level of the Hengsha realm, which is equivalent to opening up a second path in the endless Hengsha. Xiandao couldn't help but admire him. He didn't have any special physique. He was just a first-order mortal. He spent his whole life comprehending Buddhist teachings, then fed the demon with his body, recognized Xiandao as his master, and did many things that he couldn't do, didn't want to do, or dared not do before. Only in this way could he comprehend the demonic path, and then, after being severely injured, experience the great terror between life and death. Xiandao was very satisfied with him and said, "Very good. You are now the one with the highest cultivation level under my command. Now that you have broken through, you can help me a lot." "It is my lifelong honor to serve my master," monk Tianxin said humbly. "Monk, you've fallen into demonic ways and learned hypocritical politeness. An honest man has turned bad," Xiandao said, pointing at monk Tianxin. A faint smile appeared on monk Tianxin's youthful face as he calmly said, "It's all thanks to master's excellent teaching." Xiandao's face darkened, and he turned and left. Chapter 132. I've been waiting for you for a long time. The Black Soil, a Sea of Black. Long Yu and Mo Tiendi arrived with tens of thousands of men. These men were all cavalry, and they were all imposing and had stern faces. "Shelp this area off. From now on, no one is allowed to enter or leave," Long Yu coldly ordered. 30,000 imperial guards and the army of the Great Xia dynasty were divided into two groups, one in front and one behind, to encircle Xiandao and prevent him from escaping. Bang bang bang. On the black soil, the deep rumble of iron cavalry reverberated, echoing between heaven and earth. Long Yu led the Tao saints of the myriad dragons empire, walking quickly. Mo Tiendi led the Tao saints of the 18 demonic sects, walking quickly. The members of the 10 immortal sects had no one to guide them. They went their own way. The old Taoist priest still didn't appear, but he did come. He just didn't want to show his face. Dust billowed across the black earth, filling the sky. Long Yu flew over quickly and caught sight of the world-class teleportation array. "They're just ahead. Hurry up and kill this interdimensional being." Long Yu roared, his long-suppressed anger finally erupting. Mo Tiendi even took out his magic weapon, a demonic blade that exuded an eerie black aura, as if it could devour a person's soul. Kill. Mo Tiendi led the charge, and he and Long Yu were the first to arrive at the scene. Before the world-class teleportation array, Li Xiandao stood silently, dressed in a white robe, wearing a dark gold mask, and with his shoulder-length hair braided. Behind him was a large group of people. The Moon Angel Ursula, the Battle Angel Michael, the Archangel Gabriel, the Fallen Angel Lucifer, and the God of Light, Heavenly Light. Qianxin Monk, Lamo, Wu Xin'er, Long Mishu. These are all the people under Li Xiandao's command, and they have all stepped forward at this moment. Long Yu and Mo Tiendi arrived here and, from a distance of 1,000 meters, gazed at Li Xiandao. Who exactly are you? Long Yu asked with a solemn expression. You've crossed over from another realm. What is your purpose? Mo Tienga questioned. Behind them, a mighty army, the Dao Saint Army, arrived, its imposing presence and immense scale giving them a boost of courage. That's why they dared to question Li Xiandao. Li Xiandao looked at them, but did not answer their questions. Instead, he sighed softly. You've finally arrived. I've been waiting for you for so long. The invincible Dao Saint of the Myriad Dragons Empire coldly said. We have you completely surrounded now, and with 2 patriarchs present, do you still dare to be arrogant? Li Xiandao glanced at him and asked, Are your injuries no longer painful? Upon hearing this, the invincible Dao Saint felt a dull ache in his wounds and roared. You can only rely on words now. With so many of us attacking together, you will surely die. Li Xiandao shook his head and said, No matter how many pieces of trash there are, they are still trash. Just like how many ants there are, in the eyes of a true dragon, they can be killed by a single breath of dragon fire. For example, I can send you flying with just 1 finger right now. The only reason you can still stand here and talk to me, shouting, is because I'm in a good mood. If you anger me, you'll be the first person I kill, Li Xiandao said coldly. You. The invincible Dao Saint was both angry and frightened, because he knew that what Li Xiandao said was true. With Li Xiandao's strength, killing him would be very simple and would not be difficult at all. No matter how harsh your words are, it's all in vain. We are determined to destroy you today, Long Yu said coldly. Do you all think you're very powerful? Li Xiandao asked rhetorically. No, but if we work together, we can show you that this world is not to be trifled with, Long Yu said coldly. To be honest, if I were to make a move now, none of you would be a match for me, except for that Taoist priest hiding in the clouds, Li Xiandao said with a slight smile, stating a fact. Mo Tiendi and Long Yu both sneered, completely disbelieving. The old Taoist priest hiding in the clouds was startled, sensing danger approaching. He quickly consulted the oracle to predict the impending danger. If you were that powerful, you could have wiped us all out long ago. Why wait until now? Long Yu sneered. He knew Li Xiandao was strong, but he didn't believe that Li Xiandao could wipe them out by himself. Mo Tiendi thought so too. Li Xiandao shook his head and said, I'm not making a move not because I can't kill you, but because you're not worthy of my attention. Long Yu and Mo Tiendi were furious, staring at Li Xiandao with gritted teeth. The hundreds of Dao Saints behind them were seething with hatred, and Li Xiandao's words had completely belittled them. Everyone here has worked hard and practiced diligently to get to where they are, so why are you so amazing? The problem is, not only are you arrogant, but you also climb to your own heights by stepping on us, which is really annoying. Those with short tempers couldn't hold back any longer and roared, 2 patriarchs, why waste words with them? Let's just fight. Long Yu couldn't help but feel eager to try it out. Mo Tiendi pulled him back, pointed to the sky, and said, The Taoist priest hasn't come. When Long Yu saw this, he was so angry that his nose twisted. The ox nose had not appeared. This old Taoist priest seemed to have the ability to downplay his presence. If you couldn't find him, you wouldn't remember him for a while. You old Taoist priest, why aren't you coming out? Long Yu roared, truly enraged. Hidden in the clouds, the old Taoist priest was calculating the impending crisis, and the divination results he received were all bad. Danger. 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 Danger! 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 9 dangers in a row, all blood red, none of them good, made the old Taoist's heart sink. He could see no hope at all. But Long Yu below was shouting again, and that favor forced him to show himself. It's over. Is this the end of my carefree and happy life? The old Taoist priest came down in deep sorrow. The old Taoist priest who descended from the clouds met Xiandao, Long Yu, and Mo Tiendi. His first words were, "Long Yu, let's call it even." Long Yu said coldly, "Fine, let's call it even. Now let's fight." Mo Tiendi brandished his demonic blade and snarled, "Then let's fight." The old Taoist priest wore a bitter expression, cursing inwardly, "Screw you. 9 dangers, even 9 lives wouldn't be enough to kill you." Xiandao looked at them, chuckled, and said disdainfully, "Do you know why I gathered you all here?" Long Yu and the others glared angrily at Xiandao, their eyes burning with hatred. Ignoring all of this, Xiandao said to himself, "I just wanted you to come and test the mettle of one of my armies." Xiandao smirked and gave Lamo a message, saying, "I have high hopes for this army, and I hope you can satisfy them." After Xiandao finished speaking, Lamo unleashed a fierce attack, and the boundary-breaking blade erupted with unparalleled power, directly shattering the world barrier. Rumble. A world-class teleportation array was activated, this time connecting to Hell Heaven. The event was grand, and a group of giants made of flames were teleported over. Chapter 133 Severing his own arm. Thump. 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 Huge bursts of flame descended from the sky, incredibly large, burning fiercely and intensely, billowing black smoke, instantly raising the surrounding temperature. Long Yu and Mo Tiendi were so frightened that they took several steps back, unable to believe their eyes. Even the 2 people at the Hengsha realm had to retreat, and the others were even more terrified. The warhorses neighed in panic, terrified by the group of fire kings. Their intense aura of fire made them look like troublemakers. Thump. 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 The fireballs continued to fall, crashing onto the black soil and setting it ablaze. The first fireball to land unfurled its body, stood up, gripped a great sword of flame, pointed it to the sky and roared, "Burning Crusade!" Behind it, hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands of fireballs unfolded their bodies one by one, each wielding an identical greatsword, and roared in unison, "Burning Crusade!" The scene was incredibly grand, with flames raging and turning into a sea of fire, a truly terrifying sight that left Long Yu and the others speechless. "What the hell is this thing?" The old Taoist priest secretly groaned. As expected, the 9 dangers were terrifying. 10,000 fire giants appeared at once. Although each one was not strong, their combined aura was incredibly powerful. Even he felt that this was troublesome. What about the others? At this moment, on the black earth, the fire giant stood majestically. Xiandao looked on with delight. When he left, these flame kings were all just a little tall and their cultivation was still very weak. Now that they appeared, they were all 3 meters tall, very strong, and had entered their growth period. Their strength is also considerable. Each of them has reached the heavenly origin realm and will soon break through to the saint level, which is already quite incredible. "Master, I have not failed you. How did I lead your burning legion?" The war tome emerged from the teleportation array, beaming with pride, and flew to Xiandao's side, boasting of his achievement. "Very good, but why are they growing so fast?" Xiandao asked in confusion. "Of course, the environment of Hell Heaven is very suitable for them. They grow up there, making rapid progress every day. They fight with the local creatures every day, and with the amplification of my battle formation techniques, they are invincible. No one can stop them," the ancient book of war said proudly. Xiandao looked at the group of flame kings with delight. They were all his treasures. "Hurry up and pay your respects to the master," the ancient book of war roared. "Master!" 10,000 flame kings knelt down in unison, their giant swords planted in the ground, and shouted loudly. Xiandao raised his hand with satisfaction, letting them get up, then turned around and looked at Long Yu and the others. Now you know why I brought you all together, right? Xiandao spread his arms, gesturing to the invincible army behind him. I just want you to be my Burning Legion's test subjects, to see how good they are. Now, let's begin. Xiandao waved his hand. Rumble. Behind him, 10,000 flame kings ran in unison, great swords in hand, charging out in an instant. Upon witnessing this scene, Long Yu and Mo Tiendi were filled with rage and had no choice but to fight back. Everyone, attack together. They look terrifying, but they're actually weak. Mo Tiendi roared. Your opponent is me. The moon angel Ursula lightly touched the ground with her toes and flew over, unleashing a fierce slash with a moon wheel, directly sending Mo Tiendi flying. You. Mo Tiendi glared at Yu Tianxia, wishing he could curse her out. But the moon angel Ursula didn't give him a chance to speak. She immediately attacked with incredible speed. With her celestial weapon in hand, she didn't take Mo Tiendi seriously. Mo Tiendi had no choice but to fight, but unfortunately, his fate was already sealed. Long Yu, on the other hand, has been targeted by the monk Tianxin. What? You monks kill people too? Long Yu's heart sank. Now I am a demonic monk. Monk Tianxin smiled slightly, his aura dark, extremely eerie and sinister. With a single punch, mountains and rivers crumbled. Everything fell. Long Yu hurriedly tried to defend himself, but his defense was completely ineffective in the eyes of Monk Tianxin. Bang! With a single punch, Monk Tianxin shattered Long Yu's defenses, sending him flying hundreds of miles away. He then followed closely behind, his killing intent palpable. Long Yu was powerless to fight back in the hands of the monk Tianxin. As for Xiandao, he set his sights on the old Taoist priest. If there was anyone here who he could deem worthy, it would be this old Taoist priest who stood to the side with a solemn expression. What, your plan failed, and now you're full of regret? Xiandao sneered, believing that the old Taoist's ugly expression was because his plan to hide had failed, and now that he had been exposed, his threat was much less than before. However, the old Taoist priest misunderstood. He thought that Xiandao was saying that he originally planned to leave without interfering, but was trapped here because of personal relationships, and now he could not get away. For the old Taoist priest, this meant his plan had failed and he was filled with regret. I'd like to make a deal with you, the old Taoist priest said, cupping his hands in a pleading manner. Xiandao, thinking he had some new scheme, couldn't help but sneer and said, Tell me, I want to see what your new plan is. The old Taoist priest said impatiently, I'll cut off my own arm, how about you let me go? Xiandao was stunned. He was genuinely stunned. As the most powerful member of Long Yu's team, the old Taoist priest, who had been hiding in the shadows and ready to ambush people at any time, actually asked to have one of his arms cut off before leaving? Is it a scam? Xiandao looked at the old Taoist priest with suspicion and uncertainty, his hands behind his back. He was not afraid that the old Taoist priest would suddenly kill him. Why did you cut off the arm? Xiandao asked. I understand the rules of the martial world. Since we have offended you, we have only ourselves to blame, and we deserve to die. But I haven't lived enough yet, so I'll cut off my own arm and become a cripple. That way, I won't pose a threat to you. How about you let me go? The old Taoist said, his heart bleeding. This was a huge loss for him. Xiandao didn't believe that such a master would actually cut off his own arm, so he said indifferently, Fine, cut off one of your arms, and I'll let you go. Xiandao genuinely believed that the old Taoist priest would not do such a thing. But to everyone's surprise, the old Taoist priest was so excited that without saying a word, he used his true energy as a sword and slashed fiercely. Thump. With one arm hanging to the ground, the old Taoist priest looked at Xiandao and gently asked, Sir, may I walk now? Xiandao stared blankly. The strongest member of Long Yu's team. The old Taoist priest was not considered weak in his eyes. That's how he cut off his own arm. Without divine medicine from heaven and earth to replenish it, it wouldn't grow on its own. That's a disabled person, whose abilities are greatly diminished. For the first time, Xiandao began to doubt. Could it be that I've misjudged him? Is he not Long Yu's last trump card? How could someone he considered a strong man be so cowardly? Chapter 134, Clearing the Obstacles. The old Taoist priest really was that cowardly. Or perhaps he knows when to advance and when to retreat. He knows he cannot resist, so he cuts his losses in time. Xiandao's guess was wrong. This old Taoist priest was indeed not Long Yu's trump card. In fact, Long Yu and his group also wanted the old Taoist priest to be their trump card, but unfortunately the old Taoist priest didn't fall for it. You can leave now. Xiandao looked left and right. The old Taoist really didn't want to fight at all. After cutting off one of his arms, he stood quietly. Xiandao was an honest man, so he let the old Taoist priest go. The old Taoist priest made his escape immediately, leaving without saying a word. In Long Yu's incredulous gaze. In Mo Tiandi's extremely angry gaze. The old Taoist priest vanished without a trace. Xiandao murmured, "This is an extraordinary person." Behind Xiandao, the fallen angel Lucifer and the others looked at each other, also feeling strange. This old Taoist priest was indeed peculiar. On the battlefield, the situation has become one-sided. 10,000 Flame Kings charged into the army, forming battle formations of 10 men each. 10 formations formed a team, 10 teams formed a regiment, and 10 regiments formed an army. This ensures that the Burning Legion can fight separately and become invincible when combined. 10 people form a team, which can form battle formations and combined attack techniques. When combined, these techniques can be used to fight against early-stage lesser saints within the heavenly origin realm. Even a combined attack from 10 squads could defeat a great sage in his early stages. This is the battle formation method from the ancient war book, which is incredibly powerful and is why it ranks among the top 10 ancient books. Rumble. A fire king wielded his flaming greatsword and smashed it down, severing 3 large horses and killing their riders instantly. Die. A soldier struck with all his might, his spear piercing the air and embedding itself into the Flame King's body. But in an instant, the spear was burned, the spear forged from cold iron turned into molten iron, and the King of Flames could only roar, and the giant sword fell from the sky, smashing the soldier into a pulp. The others who witnessed this scene were utterly terrified. Seeing this, Xiandao was quite satisfied. Normal attacks were ineffective against the Flame King, making them essentially an invincible team. Master, isn't my battle formation method quite good? The ancient warbook said proudly. Xiandao said with satisfaction, not bad, this Burning Legion is quite suitable for you. These are child's play. In the later stages, when various large-scale battle formations are activated, even immortals will be wiped out no matter how many come, the ancient warbook said proudly. Xiandao listened without offering any opinion. Go to hell. A cold voice rang out. A cold moon descended from the sky. The moon angel was brave and invincible. With the moon wheel in hand, he directly severed Mo Tiandi's body. Demonic blood spilled across the land. The demonic cultivators paled in shock, wailing in despair. Even more devastatingly, the monk Tianxin used demonic magic to shatter Long Yu's body, killing him in the sky. On the battlefield, the Dao saints of the Wanlong Empire were shocked, followed by a deep sense of powerlessness. That's incredible. The forces under Xiandao's command were too powerful. They were utterly defeated without Xiandao even lifting a finger. At this moment, Long Mishu stepped forward and said, Master, let them stop. I will subdue them. It will be much easier to become empress with their support. Xiandao waved his hand and said, Stop. The Burning Legion immediately stopped. Some of the soldiers who were about to be killed were overjoyed at the sight, but also looked on with suspicion and uncertainty. Long Mishu stepped forward and shouted, Now you only have 2 paths before you, submit to me, or die. The Dao saints of the Wanlong Empire looked on with complicated expressions and heavy hearts. Would they ultimately have to make a woman the empress? My ancestors, as long as you support me in becoming empress, You can continue to live in the villages on Qianlong Mountain. No one will interfere with you. The Wanlong Empire will usher in a glorious era under my rule. Long Mishu walked towards the center of the battlefield and made a promise. The emperor from 1,000 years ago looked at Long Mishu, sighed helplessly, then bowed and said, "Greetings, Your Majesty." If one person worships, countless others will follow. The elders of Qianlong Mountain bowed to show their respect, and all the other soldiers knelt down and shouted loudly, "Long live the Empress! Long live the Empress! Long live the Empress!" The shouts echoed through the sky. These soldiers who had survived the ordeal were now truly afraid, and their fear of Xiandao was transferred to Long Mishu. Even the soldiers of the great Xia dynasty knelt down and shouted, "Long live the Empress!" The experts of the immortal path could only sigh helplessly and bow in greeting to Her Majesty the Empress. Get up. Those who died this time will receive compensation, and those who were injured will also be compensated. Clean up the battlefield, and we'll return to Shangjing. Long Mishu felt a sense of relief at this moment. Finally, all obstacles were gone. She will be the next empress of the Wanlong Empire, the first person to create a new world. "Master, we're leaving." Long Mishu transmitted his voice to Xiandao. Xiandao nodded and transmitted his voice. "Go back and manage the Wanlong Empire well. Remember to make good use of the Gaoshan people. They will be your best subordinates." Long Mishu remembered it all, then gestured and said, "Return now." Rumble. They came with an army of 50,000, but now only 30,000 remain. Their morale is low, and they have left the black soil. After watching them leave, Xiandao looked at the Burning Legion and asked, "Where are they going now?" "Of course we should go back to Hell Heaven. They haven't finished their special training yet. It's only been a short time." "I'm going to train them hard," said the ancient Book of War. "Okay, but do you have the coordinates of Hell Heaven?" Xiandao asked. World-class teleportation arrays allow for travel between worlds, but this teleportation also requires landmarks. Xiandao arrived in the desolate ancient land from the Great Li Land, and his subordinates were the landmarks. The Burning Legion has now arrived in the ancient lands from Hellfire, with Xiandao and the Heaven and Earth Bank as their landmarks. But were there any landmarks placed in Hell Heaven? The ancient Book of War says, "There are no landmarks, but that's all right. I can ascend again. I took them with me last time, and I can take them with me this time as well." "Aren't they too big?" Xiandao asked doubtfully. "Ascension is possible, but surely the magic treasure space can't hold 10,000 Flame Kings? It's all right, my ancient warbook can still hold it. It's just a bit cumbersome," the ancient warbook said. "However, as they continue to grow, I will no longer be able to take them with me to ascend. The world's rules will restrict me, so next time we leave Hell Heaven, it won't be good to go back in," the ancient Book of War said helplessly. "Unless it's something really important, I won't let you come back," Xiandao promised. He wanted to see the power of the Burning Legion, and now that he had, Xiandao was satisfied. "All right, then I'll take them with me." The Book of War flew into the Burning Legion, then exerted its power, enveloping 10,000 Fire Lords, and laboriously carried them up together. Xiandao watched them disappear and said, "Now that this storm is over, we should also resolve the debt issues in the desolate ancient land." Xiandao is going to do his old job, collecting debts. Chapter 135, Making a Heart Shape. Inside the Heaven and Earth Bank, Xiandao sat in the main hall, communicating with Shao Qi. Dealing with the invading enemy from the desolate ancient land was a piece of cake for Xiandao. He didn't need to worry about it. Now there's no one in the desolate land he can be afraid of, so he can properly settle the debts here. Little 7, how much is the contract for the desolate ancient land? Xiandao asked. Xiandao entrusted Shao Qi with matters such as contracts. He believed in trusting those he employed and not employing those he didn't trust. Since Shao Qi was capable, he let her take on more responsibilities, since she couldn't do without Chendi Chenjuang anyway. Shao Qi said, "There are still 150 contracts in the desolate ancient land that are valid." Just this little bit? Li Xiandao asked in surprise. Many hosts sign contracts and then die, rendering the contracts invalid and our investments worthless, Xiaoqi said helplessly. The Heaven and Earth Bank disappeared 10,000 years ago. How many people died in those 10,000 years? Those hosts either died in battle or from old age. Those who could persist for 10,000 years were all experts. Li Xiandao frowned and said, "Doesn't this mean that many contracts will be invalid in the future?" Xiaoqi smiled slightly and said, "That's not how it is. The Great Li Land and the desolate Ancient Land are the two weakest places among the 10 lands. The highest cultivation level is only Hengsha realm. Such places are like small fish ponds. They can't raise big fish. Occasionally, one big fish will appear, but it will take up more than half of the small pond. Other fish will have even less chance to survive." Li Xiandao seemed to be thinking for a moment and said, "We're blasting fish in a small pond right now, aren't we?" "You can understand it this way. Once the debts in the desolate ancient land are settled, we can go to a bigger world," Xiaoqi said. Li Xiandao nodded and said, "Of the 10 lands, the desolate ancient land and the Great Li Land are small ponds. What about the other places?" Xiaoqi explained to Li Xiandao, "The 10 lands are the Great Li Land, the desolate ancient land, the Cloud and Mist Land, the ancient Buddha Land, the Great Demon Land, the Land of 10,000 Beasts, the Kunlun Land, the Red Land, the Eternal Land, and the Land of the Dead. Among them, the Great Li Land and the desolate ancient land are the two places ranked at the bottom. They have few resources and few experts. The desolate ancient land is a little better, having produced a few Hengsha realm experts. The Great Li Land is in a terrible state, with only a handful of saints. The other 8 regions are much more numerous on average. They surround the 9 heavens, absorbing the energy from the 9 heavens to expand the origin of the world. Therefore, cultivation in the other 8 regions is extremely prosperous." Xiaoqi said. Li Xiandao listened silently. Now that he's invincible in the desolate ancient land, he started thinking about when to enter a higher world, and Xiaoqi gave him a hint. The desolate ancient land and the Great Li Land are suitable starting points for Li Xiandao's early development, but they are no longer suitable later on. Once the debt issue is resolved and Long Mishu takes control of the desolate ancient land, we will leave this place. Li Xiandao set the tone. In any case, we must ensure that Long Mishu takes control of the Wanlong Empire and turns the Eternal Land into Li Xiandao's own territory. Anyway, people from other worlds don't really care about the Great Li Land and the ancient wasteland. Experts look down on the desolate ancient land, considering it a waste of their time. Those with low strength cannot come here, and even if they do, it will be of no use. This is also why the Great Li Land and the ancient wasteland are neither too high nor too low. Of the 150 contracts, how many were tricky or difficult? Li Xiandao asked. Xiaoqi took out a contract and handed it to Li Xiandao, saying, "Of these 150 contracts, only this one is quite tricky. Even Monk Tianxin and the others couldn't solve it." Li Xiandao raised an eyebrow, surprised. Even Tianxin Monk was at the 2nd level of Hengsha, and there was still something he couldn't handle? Besides that old Taoist priest, is there anyone else in the desolate land who can defeat Monk Tianxin? Upon opening the contract, Li Xiandao was surprised to find that there really was no one in the desolate ancient land who could defeat Monk Tianxin. The tricky thing about this contract is that it's not human. A sea turtle in the ocean. The contract clearly states, "The Great Sea Sacred Turtle will repay the debt of a Xuanwu inner core from the Heaven and Earth Bank in 10,000 years, with the price being 10,000 years of its lifespan. Breach of contract, and you'll lose 100,000 years of your life." Li Xiandao weighed the contract in his mind. He asked, "Did it breach a contract?" Xiaoqi nodded and said, "It broke the contract. A month ago, the 10,000 years were up." Li Xiandao laughed heartily and said, "That's a lifespan of 100,000 years. That's a huge profit." "Yes, that's why I said this is a very tricky contract. The Great Sea Turtle is ancient, has always been hiding in the sea, and has obtained the inner core of the Xuanwu divine beast, constantly cultivating. Even Monk Tianxin can't solve it, Xiaoqi added. I'll go myself, Li Xiandao said with a confident smile. I hope this giant sea turtle will allow me to go all out this time, Li Xiana murmured to herself. Xiaoqi smiled slightly, then made a heart shape with her hands above her head and winked, saying, Master, good luck. Li Xiandao was instantly captivated, looking at Xiaoqi in surprise. He never expected that Xiaoqi, who had always been quiet and dignified, would suddenly become so playful. Don't you like it? Xiaoqi looked at Li Xiandao's surprised expression, her face regaining its composure, and muttered a question. I won't do it again. Xiaoqi turned and left. No. I really like it. I can make more in the future, Li Xiandao said firmly. Xiaoqi stumbled and said irritably, I'm not doing it anymore. I'll handle this contract, but you can have Monk Tianxin, Lucifer, and Ursula take care of the rest, Li Xiandao instructed. Xiaoqi left without looking back, and did not respond to Li Xiandao. Li Xiandao didn't see it. She was a little shy because of that, I like it very much, comment. Beyond the Great Wall, as the army was defeated, the old Taoist priest was the first to escape, having lost an arm. He did not go far before finding a mountain peak to begin tending to his injury. Sitting amidst the myriad trees, the old Taoist priest breathed deeply, 2 beams of blue light constantly emanating from his nostrils, absorbing the essence of the sun and moon, and the spiritual energy of the plants. At this moment, all the trees and flowers on the mountain peak provided energy to the old Taoist priest. The old Taoist's severed arm was growing steadily. The granulation tissue was wriggling, and the bone was spreading. Soon, an arm would grow back. After a day and a night, the old Taoist priest finally breathed a sigh of relief and stopped his cultivation. The plants and trees around him had withered, their essence drained away. The old Taoist priest's eyes twitched when he saw this, and he felt very guilty. I took your lives because of my own injuries. It was truly my fault, the old Taoist muttered. Then, after thinking for a moment, he took out all the divine energy he possessed, crushed it all, and scattered it on the ground. The plants absorbed it and began to recover rapidly. Seeing this, the old Taoist priest nodded in satisfaction. Everyone is happy. You helped me recover my arm, and I helped you nourish your bodies. It's a win-win situation, very good. This time it was really dangerous. Fortunately, I cultivate the everlasting spring immortal technique. This technique allows me to restore my severed arm without any divine medicine. This is a first-class technique. People are ignorant and do not know the benefits of this technique. It is just sitting there and no one is practicing it. The old Taoist said proudly. Chapter 136 The Great Sea Turtle. The everlasting spring immortal technique is a very common Taoist practice. Few people cultivate it because it has no fighting power from the very beginning. Starting from the first step of cultivation, one must go through the stages of mortal transformation, the cycle of destiny, seeking the Tao, nirvana, emptiness, the earthly branches, the heavenly origin, and finally becoming a saint. They have absolutely no fighting ability. In these realms, no matter what cultivation method one practices, one can easily defeat the everlasting spring immortal method, and will always be the weakest, even being killed by someone of a higher level. Only when one reaches the Great Sage realm can one possess some combat power, but even then, it's barely enough to match that of an ordinary person. The true realm of transformation is the 18-fold level of the Ganges. The realm of boundless sands is a realm where one's cultivation can encompass heaven and earth, expanding countless times in an instant, allowing for the perfect unleashing of the power of the everlasting spring immortal technique. It was within this realm that the old Taoist priest made rapid progress. He and Long Yu and Mo Tiendi entered the Hengsha realm together, but after 1,000 years, the old Taoist priest had made countless progresses, while Long Yu and Mo Tiendi remained stagnant, unable to advance. So the old Taoist priest really didn't want to cause trouble. According to his plan, as long as he survives, given the power of the everlasting spring immortal technique and its method of prolonging life, even the holy tortoise might not be able to outlive him. So he will gradually become stronger. There's no need to rush or seek any special opportunities. He wouldn't have agreed to help if it weren't to repay that favor, and he even lost an arm in the process. But at least I managed to repay that favor. Sigh, it was Long Yu who protected me when I broke through to the Hengsha realm. That favor is too great to refuse. Now I've repaid it with an arm, and I feel much better, the old Taoist said with a smug look on his face. Let that cross-dimensional being wreak havoc on this world. Anyway, among the 10 lands, this place and the Greatly Land are the least popular, the old Taoist muttered. I need to think of a way to leave this place, the old Taoist priest said, looking at the sky with a troubled expression. If he wants to leave the desolate land, the only way is to ascend and enter the next world, but ascension comes with heavenly tribulations. The tribulation is especially severe for those who ascend for the first time. It can be terrifying and make people tremble. The old Taoist priest felt he couldn't risk undergoing tribulation, especially now that his severed arm had just been repaired. Most importantly, his cultivation level was too high. Once you ascend, the lightning tribulation that strikes down will be extremely rare, enough to terrify even the old Taoist priest. He had wanted to try to ascend to heaven before, but when lightning gathered, he was so frightened that he withered on the spot. He hid in the deep mountains for several months to study Taoist scriptures before daring to come out. Alas, how to ascend and leave is a difficult problem, the old Taoist priest thought with distress. He brushed the debris off his clothes, got up, and left. Click. A blood-red embrace descended from the sky and landed in front of the old Taoist priest. Tick-tock. 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 The pocket watch continued to tick, making the old Taoist blink, not understanding what it was. Once he was sure there was no danger, the old Taoist priest picked up the pocket watch with 2 fingers and took a closer look. What is this? The old Taoist priest muttered. A ticket to the heavenly bank that can grant your wish. A voice came from the pocket watch. The old Taoist priest frowned. What nonsense. Is this some kind of magic weapon? But it doesn't look like a fabeo either. If it's not a magic artifact, how can someone be talking inside? The old Taoist priest thought for a moment, then decided to keep it in his hand and study it as he walked. It's all right. I have plenty of time to study you slowly. I don't believe I can't figure you out, the old Taoist muttered, taking his pocket watch and hurrying back to his cave. At the Heaven and Earth Bank, Xiandao held the contract and carefully sensed its contents, searching for its host. The sacred sea turtle. This must be the first time that Xiandao has focused his attention on the sea. The vast, boundless sea is where the sacred sea turtle has always remained hidden, never venturing onto land. The Xuanwu inner core it obtained in exchange for used up 10,000 years of its lifespan, but that was nothing to it. Turtles are known for their long lifespans, and if they live a long and healthy life, it will exceed everyone's expectations. Not to mention the sacred tortoise. Xiandao closed his eyes, sensing the traces of the great sea turtle. He needed to find it and then reclaim the price for breach of contract. A lifespan of 100,000 years. This lifespan was so tempting that Xiandao's mouth watered. He had already gained a lot from trading 1,000 years of lifespan before, and now he was filled with anticipation at the thought that the Time Palace would accelerate his cultivation. Found it. Xiandao opened his eyes and looked out at the endless sea, piercing through endless time and space. In the depths of the sea, a colossal creature was sleeping. The shell of this enormous creature protrudes from the sea, resembling a giant island, lush with trees and craggy rocks, making it quite peculiar. Roar. Suddenly, the giant turtle opened its eyes, its head emerging from the seabed. Sensing that someone was watching it, it roared and unleashed a tsunami, with giant waves rolling in. Who is spying on me? The great sea turtle roared to the sky, furious. As the overlord of the sea, how dare someone spy on it? Inside the Heaven and Earth Bank, Xiandao raised an eyebrow and said, Not bad strength. You were able to sense my spying. It seems I was wrong before. The old Taoist is not the most powerful in the desolate ancient land. You are. Thinking about it carefully, it makes sense. After all, the great sea turtle obtained the inner core of the divine beast Xuanwu. After absorbing it day and night for 10,000 years, How could it not make great progress? But even if you make great progress, that's no reason for you to yell at me. Li Xiandao's eyes turned cold, and he said, "These days, those who owe money really act like they're the boss. I'd like to see if you still remember this debt." Li Xiandao's figure suddenly disappeared from the heaven and earth bank. He moved at lightning speed, traveling at full speed, his body transforming into a sword beam, heading directly into the depths of the sea. Boom, boom, boom. Li Xiandao was moving so fast that explosions kept coming from behind him. Deep in the ocean, after the giant waves subsided, the sacred sea turtle raised its enormous head, looking around with furious eyes. Who exactly is spying on it? This is a provocation against the majesty of the supreme ruler of the sea. The sacred sea beast needs to find this person and tear him to pieces to vent its anger. That's how domineering it is. You can't even peek inside. Boom. Just then, a streak of sword light ripped through the sky, creating boundless waves that seemed to split the sky in two, a wound that would never heal. Thump. Suddenly, a figure appeared on the sea, with his hands behind his back, coldly watching the sacred sea turtle. He wore a dark gold mask and a black robe. "So it was you spying on me?" The giant sea turtle roared in fury, suddenly raising its head and lunging to bite down hard. Its sharp teeth, like divine weapons, could crush Li Xiandao's skin. "You beast!" Li Xiandao frowned, pointed his fingers like a sword, and struck out fiercely without any mercy. Rumble. The sword energy was divine. A single sword energy carried countless sword beams in an instant, as if 10,000 swords were ringing out on the sea, striking the sacred sea turtle in one fell swoop. The giant sea turtle let out a miserable cry as its enormous body was sent flying by Li Xiandao's sword. Rumble. The entire ocean was in turmoil, with giant waves rolling in, dozens of meters high, which was terrifying and frightening. But Li Xiandao stood calmly, watching indifferently. "Settle," Li Xiandao said coldly. The turbulent sea, with waves tens of meters high, was incredibly powerful, but all of it stopped at Li Xiandao's word. Chapter 137. Li Xiandao goes all out. The great sea turtle was sent flying by Li Xiandao's sword. Its body rolled several times in the sea, creating huge waves that surged and made the ocean churn. With Li Xiandao's words settled, the great sea sacred turtle finally began to properly examine Li Xiandao. Li Xiandao's sword strike just now left a mark several hundred meters long and several tens of meters deep on its shell, but it did not penetrate the great sea sacred turtle's defenses. This shows how terrifying its shell is. But it wasn't easy either. It was knocked over several times by Li Xiandao's sword, and its back was still burning with pain. It glared angrily at Li Xiandao. "Who exactly are you? Is there such a remarkable person as you in the desolate ancient land?" The great sea turtle roared, opening its mouth to reveal a mouth full of sharp fangs. "Who am I?" Li Xiandao smirked and said coldly, "I am your creditor." "Bullshit. I don't owe anyone anything." The great sea turtle roared, glaring angrily at Li Xiandao. "Are you really sure?" Li Xiandao smiled sarcastically. "So he really didn't intend to pay it back? If I need something, I just steal it. Why would I borrow it? That's utter nonsense. What I steal is mine." The great sea turtle sneered, staring domineeringly at Li Xiandao. "So, I have no creditors. Who do you think you are, daring to come and collect debts from me?" The great sea turtle's temper began to flare. Li Xiandao said coldly, 10,000 years ago the heaven and earth bank, do you still remember it?" The great sea turtle's face stiffened, and it stopped moving in the sea. But then, it struggled to stand up. It was enormous, with one eye bigger than Li Xiandao's. It growled, "What kind of bullshit heaven and earth bank is this? I've never even heard of it." Li Xiandao sneered. This great sea turtle really wanted to renege on its promise. "You still remember that Xuanwu inner core, right?" Li Xiandao said with a mocking smile. "Get lost. That's my inner core. I am the overlord of the ocean. Who do you think you are, daring to act so arrogantly here?" The great ocean turtle roared, its eyes blazing with fury. The thing it feared most had come to pass. The Heaven and Earth Bank has come to collect a debt. But it doesn't matter. It is no longer the weak sea turtle it was 10,000 years ago. Now, it is the undisputed overlord of the sea. Even on land, it is undoubtedly the #1 overlord of the desolate ancient land. So, it's trying to renege on its debt. Over the course of 10,000 years, the Xuanwu inner core has long since become one with it. Taking out the Xuanwu inner core now is equivalent to cutting it off. This was even more unacceptable than killing it. The great sea turtle glared at Xiandao, its heart filled with rage. Its massive body stared at Xiandao, wishing it could swallow him whole. If you dare to spout nonsense again, I'll let you taste the power of the ocean overlord. Death is no pleasant experience, the ocean turtle said coldly. It wanted Xiandao to back down and pretend the matter never happened. The overlord of the sea? Xiandao laughed, raising his hand and pointing his fingers as if they were a sword, pointing at the overlord of the sea before him. Since you're so powerful, do you dare to take a blow from my sword? Xiandao asked sharply. He used all his strength in that previous sword strike, but Xiandao did not unleash the great river sword chi in that strike. It was merely a sword aura. It couldn't be considered peak strength. But now, the great river sword chi within Xiandao's body is surging. The great sea turtle laughed loudly, its body swaying, causing the seawater to surge again. I am a sacred turtle. Although I cannot compare to divine beasts, my defense is basically invincible. You couldn't break through it before, and you still want to break through it now. Xiandao stood calmly on the sea, pointing his fingers like a sword at the sacred sea turtle, and said, If you're so confident, don't beg for mercy later. Humph, I'll crush you first. The great sea beast roared and charged forward. Xiandao sneered. You're a sacred beast? You look more like a mad dog. Since it's a mad dog, it deserves a good beating. Xiandao's eyes narrowed, and the surging sword energy within his body burst forth. The sword of the great river descends from the heavens. Rumble. A surge of sword energy erupted from Xiandao's body, and a sharp sword intent rippled around him. Xiandao stood above the sea, his robes fluttering, his eyes sharp, and said, Kill. With a single slash of the sword, an immense river was created. River of sword energy. Countless sword energies pieced together to form a vast, surging, and unstoppable river. The great river itself was a sword aura, extremely terrifying. After falling, it directly struck the back of the great sea turtle. Xiandao had a saying, if you don't cut off the head, you won't kill it. He wanted to shatter the hardest part of the great sea sacred turtle, making it utterly despair and realize that the heaven and earth money house was not to be trifled with. Although Chendi Qianzhuang is not at its peak yet, it is not something a small sea overlord in the desolate ancient land can renege on. Boom. This attack directly sank the giant sea turtle, with endless sword energy continuously striking its shell. Bang 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 bang. A woo. The giant sea turtle roared, struggled, howled, and fought back fiercely. But it was no use. Xiandao's sword, and Dai's sword, continued to strike its back. Thump. The stiff shell of the giant sea turtle began to crack, and the sea turtle panicked. Black tortoise divine armor. The great sea turtle unleashed its ultimate technique, opening its mouth to spew forth a tapestry of magnificent beauty. Beneath this tapestry of mountains and rivers, an extremely terrifying light shimmered between heaven and earth. Amidst this magnificent tapestry, there lies a mysterious, blood-stained, and hard scale, unlike anything of the ordinary. The scales of the black tortoise. This is the magic weapon of the great sea turtle. It refined and nurtured the scales that the black tortoise had shed, and now it has become an incomparably terrifying defensive treasure. Block him! Roared the great sea turtle. Once it held the line, it would kill Xiandao. They actually dared to smash its shell. They deserved to die. Amidst the surging sword energy, a piece of divine armor appeared, immediately causing Xiandao's eyes to narrow. You think the Xuanwu's divine armor can protect you? Li Xiandao coldly retorted. This wasn't the complete Xuanwu armor. It was just a piece of divine armor, which was completely harmless. Shatter! Li Xiandao shouted coldly, and a dense sword aura erupted from his body. A blood-red soul appeared between his brows, transforming into the shape of a sword, which was Li Xiandao's sword soul. With the emergence of the sword spirit, this was Li Xiandao's first time slaying an enemy, and Xuanwu's divine armor was far from sufficient. In Li Xiandao's eyes, everything must be shattered. Shatter! Li Xiandao's eyes were cold as his sword spirit rushed into the great river sword, causing its power to surge. Clang! 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 Countless sword energies emitted sounds as they relentlessly pierced downwards, unleashing unparalleled terror with immense power, covering the sea surface and continuously striking the Xuanwu divine armor. Bang 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 bang. At this moment, the Xuanwu divine armor had lost all its advantages. It was merely a piece of scale armor that had fallen from the Xuanwu, unable to withstand Li Xiandao's relentless attacks. Click. At that very moment, the first crack appeared in the Xuanwu divine armor. Subsequently, countless cracks began to appear. Boom. The great river sword rushed in, smashing the Xuanwu divine armor, and then pierced directly into the shell of the great sea sacred turtle. Click. The seemingly indestructible shell shattered at that moment, and the screams of the sacred sea turtle echoed across the ocean. Chapter 138 The Hall of Inheritance. The giant sea turtle's shell cracked, instantly revealing its soul beneath. Li Xiandao approached from afar, closing in instantly, and then fiercely pointed a finger at the giant sea turtle's soul. Now, do you still remember the Heaven and Earth Bank, and the Xuanwu inner core? Li Xiandao asked coldly. The giant sea turtle was so frightened that it didn't move. Its shell was shattered. Now, in front of Li Xiandao, it was like a beautiful girl being naked in front of a pervert. Naked. I remember. The great sea turtle hurriedly replied, no longer daring to hide anything or act arrogantly. It never expected that Li Xiandao would be so terrifying. This sword strike almost scared the shit out of it. Then do you still remember the consequences of your breach of contract? Li Xiandao asked coldly. The sacred sea turtle was speechless. It forgot. 10,000 years have passed, and it has long forgotten the contents of the original contract. Li Xiandao coldly snorted. You traded 10,000 years of your lifespan for the Xuanwu inner core. You must return the Xuanwu inner core after 10,000 years. Anyone who breaches the contract will have to repay tenfold. In other words, I'm going to take away the Xuanwu inner core and your 100,000 years of lifespan now, Li Xiandao said coldly. I only have 100,000 years left to live. If you take it all away, how am I supposed to live? The great sea turtle exclaimed in shock and anger. Furthermore, the Xuanwu inner core has long been integrated with me. Taking it away now is tantamount to cutting me in half with a knife, the great sea turtle pleaded. Li Xiandao coldly replied, if that's the case, then it really does give me the urge to strike. You devil! The giant sea turtle roared angrily. Li Xiandao placed his index finger on the forehead of the great sea turtle and said calmly, remember this in your next life. Never break a contract, especially one you signed yourself. No! The great sea turtle exclaimed in terror. The Heaven and Earth Bank's power is activated, and according to the contract, it extracts 100,000 years of the great sea sacred turtle's lifespan. It instantly felt its lifespan rapidly aging, and there was nothing it could do to stop it. The great sea turtle looked at Li Xiandao in horror. However, Li Xiandao was wearing a mask, cold and silent, exuding a deep sense of fear. The Heaven and Earth Money House extracts lifespan very quickly. In less than a quarter of an hour, the great sea turtle, struggling, could no longer move. Its life had come to an end. It was old and frail, drifting on the sea, and could die at any moment. Li Xiandao withdrew his finger and said calmly, no one can break the contract of the Heaven and Earth Bank. Boom. Li Xiandao transformed into a sword aura, rising from the ground and disappearing into the horizon. On the open sea, the seawater, stirred up by Li Xiandao's flight, began to churn again. The giant sea turtle's body slowly sank to the bottom of the sea, where it was devoured by countless marine creatures, fulfilling their purpose. At the Heaven and Earth Money House, Xiandao returned, washed up, changed his clothes, removed his dark gold mask, and leisurely lay down on a chair. Xiaoqi brought over some fruit, placed it on the table, and said, "I've already sent Monk Tianxin, Lucifer, and the moon angel Ursula out to collect their debts. It won't be long before the debts here are cleared." Xiandao nodded, picked up an apple, and with a flick of his finger, broke the apple into more than a dozen small pieces. He picked up one piece and ate it. "I just retrieved the 100,000-year lifespan of the great sea sacred turtle, along with the Xuanwu inner core. I gave it back then," Xiandao said calmly. "Really? Then we can unlock the third mountain peak." Xiaoqi exclaimed in surprise. "A third mountain peak?" Xiandao asked in surprise. "The first mountain is the Palace of Time, the second mountain is the Library of All Nations. What is the third mountain?" Xiandao asked. "It's the Hall of Inheritance." Xiaoqi immediately exclaimed. "The Inheritance Hall?" Xiandao raised an eyebrow. "The Hall of Inheritance is where countless figures from ancient times to the present, born in stories, legends and myths, have had close relationships with some of them, including the Heaven and Earth Bank. After their passing, the Heaven and Earth Bank took in a wisp of their remnant souls and placed them in the Hall of Inheritance." Xiaoqi said. "Can they be resurrected?" Xiandao asked. "I can't." Xiaoqi shook her head regretfully. She also wanted to revive these people. Once they were revived, they would definitely be a very powerful fighting force. It's already quite an achievement that the Heaven and Earth Bank was able to preserve even a wisp of their souls. "They cannot inherit the mountain range, nor can they be resurrected," Xiaoqi said. Xiandao asked, "What would it take to redeem this inheritance hall?" "A lifespan of 100,000 years." Xiaoqi smiled sweetly. Xiandao snorted coldly. "Was it when you gave me the contract for the great sea turtle that you were already thinking about redeeming the inheritance hall?" Seeing this, Xiaoqi cutely made a heart shape with her hands and said, "Master is so smart." Xiandao's inner frustration vanished upon seeing this heart gesture, and he sighed helplessly. "I thought I could freely control this 100,000-year lifespan." If Xiandao could freely control his 100,000-year lifespan, he could burn it all away and definitely reach the realm of immortals. Xiaoqi smiled and said, "Master, you'll die if you do that. I'll be welcoming my 10th master. Then I can make a heart shape with my hands for him, wear pretty clothes for him, call him master, and spend every day with him." Xiandao frowned, stared at Xiaoqi, and asked very seriously, "Have you ever made a heart shape with your hands for other masters before?" Xiaoqi blinked, chuckled, and said, "Do you think everyone is as open-minded as you?" "What do you mean?" Xiandao asked, puzzled. The previous masters were all native residents of the 9 heavens and 10 earths, deeply bound by the ideas here. They didn't value women much, and they didn't like to delegate authority to me, worried that I wouldn't handle things well. They treated me like a vase, only responsible for being pretty. Xiaoqi sighed. Xiandao's expression shifted, and he said, "I have never done that. That's why I made a heart shape with my hands for you. Those other owners don't even know what making a heart shape with their hands means." "How boring," Xiaoqi said, wrinkling her delicate nose. Xiandao's lips curled up into a smile. If he said the previous masters were boring, wouldn't that mean he was very interesting? "Ahem, take this 100,000 years of lifespan and go redeem it from the inheritance hall," Xiandao said generously. Xiaoqi looked at Xiandao and secretly asked, "Are you happy now?" "What are you talking about? I am doing everything for the sake of the Heaven and Earth Bank. Don't be so presumptuous with me." Xiandao frowned and said righteously, "Looks like I can't be so unrestrained with you anymore. Sigh, even making a heart shape with my hands counts as being unrestrained. Oh well, I'll go redeem the inheritance hall." Xiaoqi sighed helplessly and turned to leave. Xiandao frowned. Chapter 139 Xiao Wuji. Part 1. Rumble. At the cost of Shao Qi's 100,000 years of lifespan, a new mountain peak appeared within the heaven and earth money house. A mountain peak with a great sense of depth. The towering peaks cascade down like flowing water from their very tip to their lowest point. On this mountain, there is a grave at every interval. Xiandao stood directly in front of the trading hall and could see everything clearly. Perhaps this is the soul of the masters from past generations collected in the Hall of Inheritance. Shao Qi walked over and said, "So, do you want to go take a look?" Xiandao nodded and said, "I do want to go and take a look. I suggest you go up from the bottom floor one by one, talk to them, and discuss the Tao. It's much better than accelerating time by yourself," Shao Qi reminded Xiandao knew that everyone here was more powerful than him. Even if he has the talent of a prophet, able to see 10,000 years in a glance and trace back to the source, it is still not as good as having a discussion with these people once in the time hall to spend 500 years alone. Because many things cannot be solved simply by racking your brains. You need someone to open a window for you, to let in the first ray of sunlight, before you can see the sun. Xiandao said to Shao Qi, "From now on, I will properly discuss the Tao with them. You will help me manage the Heaven and Earth Bank. Unless guests come, don't call me." Shao Qi nodded, watching Xiandao leave, and murmured, "Work hard. The prophet's talent is incredible. You have unlimited potential. Keep going." The Hall of Heritage is different from the Hall of Time and the Library of Nations. The Palace of Time stands firmly atop the mountain. The Universal Library is a mountain that has been transformed into a vast library. The main Hall of Inheritance is located at the foot of the mountain. It is an inconspicuous hall, and once you go inside, you will see that there are no common items inside. For example, tables, chairs, curtains, windows, etc. There were only two large doors, one in front and one behind, through which sunlight streamed in, revealing countless hanging kites to Xiandao in the inheritance hall. Countless kites hung overhead, visible to Xiandao with a simple glance up. Here, there are beautiful kites and hopeful light, but the combination of the two makes Xiandao feel a sense of loneliness. Because only they exist. The kite speaks to the sunlight. Xiandao walked out of the main hall and saw a winding mountain road. He hadn't walked far when he came across the first tomb. The tomb of the god of war Xiao Wuji. Xiandao thought about it carefully. He had read many unofficial histories, official histories, and biographies in the Wangua Library, and it seemed that he had seen this Xiao Wuji before. The invincible war god from 30,000 years ago, with a long spear, made the heavens and the earth bow down in submission, Xiandao murmured. "I never thought that after all these years, your reputation would still be so great." A slightly melancholy voice rang in Xiandao's ears. Xiandao remained expressionless, turned around, and looked at a phantom. Xiao Wuji. Even in his illusory form, one could see his former power. His robust physique, simple clothes, and canvas shoes revealed him to be a very unassuming man. He smiled at Xiandao. "You are mentioned in many biographies," Xiandao nodded and said. "Are you the new owner of the Heaven and Earth Bank?" Xiao Wuji asked. Xiandao nodded, looked at himself and said, "Is he still pleasing to your eye? At least better than the last one." Xiao Wuji said with satisfaction. Even though the person standing in front of him now was a disabled person, someone with cerebral palsy, he still thought he was better than the last one. Xiandao smiled and said, "It seems I'm not bad. Do you know what happened when your predecessor entered the Hall of Inheritance and saw me?" Xiao Wuji asked. Xiandao thought for a moment, wondering what kind of trouble the other party might cause, given his personality. "Did they dig up your grave?" Xiandao joked. Xiao Wuji looked surprised and asked, "How did you know?" Xiandao asked in even greater surprise, "He really did that?" Xiao Wuji nodded with a cold laugh. He said, "It seems you know him quite well, otherwise you wouldn't have guessed correctly." Xiandao was speechless. Why did you have to dig up someone else's grave? I'm now deeply troubled by the mess he left behind, cleaning up his mess everywhere, Xiandao said unhappily. That son of a bitch. He caused all sorts of trouble and finally brought about his own demise. Everyone's happy now. The only pity is that he almost destroyed the Heaven and Earth Bank as well, Zhao Wudi said regretfully. No destruction, no construction. I'm here to revitalize the Heaven and Earth Bank, Xiandao said firmly. Not bad, you have ambition. Would you like to learn some marksmanship from me? Zhao Wudi praised Xiandao's attitude and took the initiative to speak. Xiandao shook his head and said, I will not learn your spear technique, I will learn your Tao. Even when Xiandao was practicing the Great River Sword, he didn't directly follow the original Great River Sword path. He always created his own unique sword technique. Although his swordsmanship still heavily incorporates elements of the Great River Sword, there is still a significant difference between his version and the original Great River Sword. Because Xiandao disliked following a set routine, he cultivated very quickly. He would often take a look, then take 3 steps, and then look again. If he made a mistake but felt comfortable with it, he wouldn't correct it and would continue down the wrong path. Therefore, Xiandao's Great River Sword Qi has been modified a lot. Originally, the Great River Sword Qi did not contain a sword soul, but Xiandao felt that his sword path had always been integrated with heaven and earth, and that his sword soul should also be integrated with heaven and earth. All of this led Xiandao to dislike following others step by step. He only needed someone to give him guidance at crucial moments. Zhao Wudi looked at Xiandao with admiration in his eyes and said, You're quite ambitious. Then take a look at my path. Zhao Wudi pointed a finger, accurately landing it on Xiandao's brow. Boom. Xiandao did not resist, so his soul instantly fell into a void. In this space, Zhao Wudi, wielding a long spear, exuded unparalleled power. At the same level as Xiandao, he began to attack Xiandao. Without further ado, Xiandao conjured a sword and began fighting Zhao Wudi. This is a battle of spirits, with Xiandao's external body standing in front of Zhao Wudi's tomb. Behind him, Zhao Wudi's phantom had disappeared. In the void, Xiandao unleashed his Great River Sword Qi with all his might, while simultaneously absorbing Zhao Wudi's Dao. At the same time, the many books he had read in the Universal Library came to mind one by one, allowing Xiandao to focus on 3 things at once and begin to gain insights continuously. This is the gift of a prophet. It's terrifying. Xiandao fought with Zhang Wuji for a quarter of an hour, then thoroughly understood Zhao Wuji's Dao, absorbed a portion that suited him, and defeated him, thus ending the fight. Outside, Xiandao opened his eyes, and countless complex Daoist auras surged into them, only calming down after a few seconds. Zhao Wuji said, Your talent is terrifying. You've drained me dry. Go find someone else. I need to rest. Xiandao looked at other graves and walked over. Chapter 140 Sword God, Part 2. Xiandao continued searching for the second tomb. He moved very quickly, and the second tomb matched his attributes. Sword God. He was also an invincible cultivator from more than 30,000 years ago, in the same era as Zhao Wudi. Unfortunately, this sword god's time was too short. He fought alone with his sword at his peak, stormed the immortal realm, and wreaked havoc there before finally being killed. The god of war, Zhao Wudi, has never faced this god of swords. Now, lying on this mountain, less than a kilometer apart, 2 extremely powerful individuals are having a conversation across the distance. Xiandao had higher expectations for this sword god than for Zhao Wudi, because he also used a sword and was particularly curious to know just how powerful this sword god, who had reached the peak of his power and stormed into the immortal realm, was. The sword god's tomb is simple: a tombstone, a small mound, and a few blooming flowers swaying in the wind in front of the tombstone. Standing before the tombstone, Xiandao was met with an incredibly terrifying sword aura that shot towards him with a thunderous roar, its terrifying force sending shivers down his spine. The sword energy passed through Xiandao's body without leaving any trace. You also practice swordsmanship? The remnant soul of the sword god appeared and asked curiously. This sword god was a withered old man with his hair braided into a single braid, piercing eyes, and his hands clasped behind his back. Li Xiandao nodded and said, "The sword of the great river." The sword god understood and said, "I've heard of it. It was created by an ancient god who looked at the Milky Way in the celestial realm. The great river sword also has this meaning in its description from heaven." Li Xiandao looked at the sword god and asked, "What kind of sword do you practice?" "Me." The sword god smirked and said, "A sword for killing." A fighting spirit suddenly appeared in Li Xiandao's eyes, and he said, "Would you like to see it?" "I will kill you," the sword god whispered. "I'm not afraid," Li Xiandao said with a gentle smile and firm determination. "All right, let's go then." The sword god nodded in satisfaction and took a step forward. Boom. In that instant, the mountain collapsed, the sea tsunami erupted, the earth cracked open, and a hole appeared in the sky. Countless sword energies surged forth, like demons from hell, trying to drag Li Xiandao down to hell. Caught off guard, Li Xiandao's vision went black. He spat out a mouthful of blood, and took a step back. "You are dead," the sword god said calmly. Li Xiandao looked at the sword piercing his heart, the pain that went straight to his bones, and muttered to himself, "This is what death feels like. It's truly terrifying." Looking at the sword god, he stood with his hands behind his back, calmly watching Li Xiandao. Li Xiandao slowly pulled the sword from his heart, watched it fade and disappear, and said, "Continue. I will only kill you 9 times today. How much you can learn from it is all I can gain," the sword god said calmly. Li Xiandao nodded, ignoring his own injuries, and looked firmly at the sword god. "Second sword," the sword god said softly, taking another step forward. Boom. The exact same scene appeared again, which was terrifying, but this time Li Xiandao had the experience from last time and was not afraid at all. Click. Li Xiandao pointed his fingers like a sword, closed his eyes, and slashed out with his sword, directly shattering the sword god's move. The sword god stared at Li Xiandao in astonishment, puzzled. "Why did you comprehend it so quickly?" Although my sword strike and the one before were based on the same principle, the sword techniques were different. You couldn't possibly have noticed, let alone defended against it. Li Xiandao calmly replied, "Because the same moves are ineffective against me." The sword god frowned, and this time he drew his sword and made a simple thrust. This strike was the move the sword god used most often in his entire life. It's also the most ordinary move. Countless people have died from this move. This sword strike embodies the sword intent of the sword god. The madness of killing until the heavens and earth are turned upside down, the awakening of daring to change the world, and the persistence of not giving up until you are dead. All of these were seen by Li Xiandao. He couldn't resist. Li Xiandao's sword and the sword god's sword were thrust out at the same time, but the sword god's sword was faster, fiercer, and more powerful. Li Xiandao's heart. Another sword strike. He's dead again. The sword god silently watched as Li Xiandao pulled out the sword energy and crushed it. Li Xiandao was stabbed twice in the heart, and he did not heal them. He left them there, causing him excruciating pain, but Li Xiandao did not even flinch or utter a sound. He looked at the sword god with a calm expression, but the sword energy around him had materialized, each sword energy like a sharp sword, exuding extraordinary power. The sword god felt the same way. He suddenly realized that Li Xiandao was also a respectable person, and that his perseverance was something that not everyone possessed. "I just struck 3 times and killed you twice. I said I would kill you 9 times, the sword god said. Li Xiandao shook his head and said, "No need." The sword god frowned and looked at Li Xiandao. "I have already understood your swordsmanship very clearly from that last sword strike. You will not be able to kill me no matter what. Let me kill you instead," Li Xiandao said firmly. The sword god looked at Li Xiandao with surprise, thinking it was a lame joke, deliberately made to make him laugh. But he discovered that what Li Xiandao said was true, and that Li Xiandao was even preparing to make a move. "Since you're so confident, then let's give it a try." The sword god was a little provoked, Li Xiandao's attitude was far too arrogant. Li Xiandao didn't explain. He had figured it out, and that was that. There was nothing more to say. When I kill you, you will believe that I have figured you out completely. Li Xiandao casually picked up a sword aura from beside him, took a simple step, and slashed directly. The sword god just now thrust. Li Xiandao is now facing a slash. Thrusting and slashing are very common and widespread sword techniques. Even ordinary children can practice them with a wooden sword. Even when Li Xiandao and the sword god reach that level, they still use this move. Because the greatest truths are the simplest, all sword techniques are ultimately based on the most basic sword moves. Although Li Xiandao's slash and the sword god's thrust have different moves, they are essentially the same. Because Li Xiandao used the same kind of frenzied killing that the sword god had just used, the kind of awakening that dared to change the world, the kind of persistence that wouldn't stop until he killed you. Li Xiandao was perfectly copied, and his own insights were added. It is your good fortune to strike you with my sword. You cannot escape it, and dying by my sword is your honor. This domineering nature of Li Xiandao angered the sword god, who took a step back and then unleashed a burst of sword energy to block Li Xiandao. But Li Xiandao was no longer someone he could stop. Li Xiandao embodies an indomitable spirit and a frenzied madness. Li Xiandao was incredibly fast. Before the sword god's sword energy could even touch him, he had already slashed at the sword god's chest. Holding the sword in one hand and bracing the hilt with the other, he exerted tremendous force and slashed down. The sword god stared at Li Xiandao in shock, never imagining that the sword intent and sword path he had comprehended throughout his life could be so thoroughly understood by Li Xiandao in just 3 short sword strikes. Li Xiandao lowered his sword energy and continued walking up the mountain. The sword god was no longer of any help to him. At this moment, Li Xiandao suddenly felt that the immortals in the immortal realm were too weak. They were being slaughtered by the swordsmanship of the sword god, while the sword god was wiped out in just a few moves when facing him.